Hi, my name is Lindsay Moore, and for this speech I chose the topic of constitutional representative republic, speaking in particular about the United States, since we are the only constitutional representative republic. Put up in smoke on this title page because I have a really strong feeling that we're really starting to stray away from the roots of our founding fathers. Alright, so the first thing I have here is a definition. What is a constitutional representative republic? And so the definition is a constitutional republic is a state where the officials are elected as representatives of the people and must govern according to existing constitutional law that limits the government's power over citizens. And this is precisely the type of government that we have in the United States. However, it's not really uncommon that if you were to ask most people on the street, what type of government do we have in the United States, a lot of people would answer that we are a democracy. And it's fair and easy to understand why many people have this type of misunderstanding or misconception. First, a constitutional republic is technically considered a form of a democratic governance. But I also believe that our education system has been trained to largely ignore the differences and lean more towards teaching ideas of democracy in its purest form. Interestingly, though, even as the framers are working, towards sculpting our new type of government, there was a great deal of debate about the use of the term democracy being applied to it in any form. And it should be notable that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or in the Constitution. And this is because the idea of a republic was so central to the formation of our government. So, what are the differences between a democracy and a constitutional republic? So, I took these bullet points directly from this link that I put on the bottom of the slide. Some main takeaways. Republics and democracies both provide a political system in which citizens are represented by elected officials who are sworn to protect their interests. In a pure democracy, laws are made directly by the voting majority, leaving the rights of the minority largely unprotected. And it's a very important point when talking about pure democracies, and I'll get to that in a little more detail later on. In a republic, laws are made by the representatives chosen by the people, and they must comply with a constitution that specifically protects the rights of the minority from the will of the majority. And also in this article it stated that the United States was basically a republic, but is best described as a representative democracy. Okay. So I have this video here that I thought was pretty neat that talks about why our founders formed a constitutional republic versus a pure democracy. And I think it's really important to not only understand the differences between a pure democracy and a republic, but also stop it, not yet. But also to understand the dangers of a pure democracy and why our founders chose to reject the idea of a democracy and built really on this idea of a republic. And James Madison wrote extensively on the topic of democracies versus republics. He clearly laid out the dangers of a pure democracy and the benefits of a republic in his Federalist 10 essay. He really focuses on the dangers of factions and mob rule and how it could result, how that could be a result of a pure democracy. Madison defined pure democracy as a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person, and a republic as a government in which a scheme of representation takes place. For Madison, democracy, a direct democracy that is, and a republic meant representatives of the government. He really believed that if every individual had a vote and that those votes were directly and individually counted, that the majority, the faction, would always overrule the minority and really would impose on the liberty of the minority. Madison's writings really demonstrate that our only real solution, or as he states it, the cure to the issue is a government that is led by representatives, which he considered a republic. So his ideas were key and very important to what we now have as our type of government. So I just want to play this video real quick.
The framers emerged from 4 months of secrecy with the first national constitution ever put to paper. Well, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us?
Well, sir, a republic, if you can keep it.
For the first time in history, men invented a government. But what kind of government was it?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
That's right, a republic.
There had been republics in the past, and it was assumed we would have a republic of some form here.
And that republic would be structured so as to prevent the majority from oppressing a minority.
What were they afraid of? The accumulation of powers in one hand. And one hand could be a single dictator. It could be a very, very powerful powers in one hand. And one hand could be a single dictator. It could be a very, very powerful majority that tramples on people's rights.
I think they actually did not have a very high opinion of direct democracy. They really wanted a constitutional republic.
Democracy in the late 18th century, it means mob rule.
The single biggest advantage of a republic is that it recognizes that the government are our servants and the people are the masters.
I think the framers were very realistic about human nature, and it's probably the thing which sets our government apart.
We make allowance for a certain degree of selfishness in men, wrote the Scottish philosopher David Hume, because we know it to be inseparable from human nature. Madison shares that skepticism. If men were angels, he wrote, no governments would be necessary.
On the other hand, they did not think that they were constructing a government for devils, because that can't be done.
The framers are deeply realistic about human nature, but also having a faith in the possibilities of human enlightenment. We shouldn't call them either skeptics or idealists. They're a little bit of both.
Well, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us?
Well, sir, a republic, if you can keep it.
That will be a challenge.
I think those are the most chilling words of any framer, because what he was saying is that we've given you a republic, but it's yours to lose. Every generation will have to step up and defend those liberties.
Or as an old song put it, freedom is a hard-won thing. You have to work for it, fight for it, day and night for it, and every generation has to win it again.
Yeah, I thought that was a really excellent, well done video. And just a few more things. And they touched briefly on Madison, and the use of representatives is what gives us some guarantee that dangerous factions, or as they talk about mob rule in the video, is that whether that's a majority or the minority, that they remain contained to a particular area or district. Basically, in short, representatives that we use as part of what makes us a republic. Representatives dilute the power of factions. And dangerous and passionate, intense ideas and opinions are not likely to be shared by a majority of the large population. They may affect individual representatives, states, or districts, but they're far less likely to affect the whole of the union, unlike results that may come from a pure democracy where there's individuals or there's a popular vote. One of the things that Madison says, or I'm quoting him, is that that state representatives, through their wisdom, may best discern the true interests of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice its temporary or partial considerations. And I have to be honest that today it's one of the things I see that really departs from what Madison's vision was for a republic. As a country, we've become so partisan that it's difficult to believe that our elected representatives are using their wisdom properly, and expressing any kind of patriotism or love of justice. This hyper-partisan environment is leading to some serious and dangerous consequences, and it's where I think that's one part of where we're starting to go astray. So this is where I wanted to talk about, the question: are we straying from our roots, our Republican roots? And I have to say that, especially in the past year, it's been pretty scary, I think. In recent years, there's been calls for things like the abolishment of Electoral College, dismantling or rewriting of our Constitution, even expanding the number of Supreme Court justices. These types of ideas have been growing with intensity over the past, for several years now, but especially recently. And to be clear, these ideas and attempts are attempts to move our country toward a pure democracy, banning the Electoral College in particular. And it should not go without mentioning that pure democracies a lot of times end up being closely related to socialist countries, or sometimes even communist countries. When they talk about in the video, what the founders feared the most was that the power would be in the hands of just one or a few. And, that is the cornerstone of an authoritarian and totalitarian society. Pure democracies tend to help that idea be pushed forward, because that gives the power to a concentrated group of people that are highly susceptible to the influences of powerful groups or even one person. Pure democracies, as I've stated and was stated in other in the video, I believe, really protect the minority, or don't protect, they don't protect the minority. Instead, it drowns them out. And all these ideas are really dangerous to our country and everything that we've always stood for. And it really seems to me that we're starting to pick up a pace towards that road that could fundamentally change our basic rights and liberties, and the very things that our founders and our citizens fight and die for to protect every single day. And another thing that's been very relevant in the past few years is that Congress has basically become incapable of effectively doing what they were elected to do. That idea that Madison set forth is that our representatives' patriotism, love, and love of justice would least likely to sacrifice their temporary or partial considerations. Yeah, that seems to have completely gone away. Debate about ideas, compromise, the love of country, and our patriotism, they've become toxic. We think those things are bad things. You're not allowed to talk about these things anymore. Social justice, rather than simply just justice, has been the main theme. And just to conclude here, in the video, they say that it's up to each generation to protect and defend the Republic, and to stand up for what this country has always represented as and that's individual freedoms, expression, and liberty. Not everything about our system of government is perfect, but the genius behind all of it is that we have the framework and we have the tools to make changes without tearing everything apart. In recent months, I've watched the news, and we can watch our cities burn, murder of innocent adults and children. Independent business owners who are already hard hit by a pandemic have to stand by and watch their businesses and property be stolen and destroyed by people who are protesting injustice. What does that injustice do to validate the injustice that they claim to be protesting? It's just beyond me. So I'm just going to leave with this quote, and I thought it was a good end to this idea and this discussion. America is a republic and not a pure democracy. The contemporary efforts to weaken our republic Our Republican customs and institutions, in the name of a greater equality, thus run against the efforts by America's founders to defend our country from the potential excesses of democratic majorities. American republicanism and the ordered liberty it makes possible are grounded in the Federalist recognition that non-majoritarian parts of the community make legitimate contributions to the community's welfare, and that preserving these contributions is the hallmark of political justice. But the careful balance produced by our mixed republic is threatened by an egalitarianism that undermines the social, familial, religious, and economic distinctions and inequalities that undergird our political liberty. Preserving the Republican freedoms we cherish requires tempering egalitarian zeal and moderating the hope for a perfectly just democracy. And with that, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.